Hi, I'm Tom, and this is your guide to port. I think port is an underappreciated wine style in our country. Most people just drink it at Christmas. They think it's really deep, tannic, rich, quite sweet, fortified, high alcohol wines. And it is that, by and large, but it's also loads of other things as well. And I want to get you to be drinking it throughout the year and enjoying the different styles available. It's a wine with a lot of history and a lot of heritage. The English wine trade has been buying port wines since the 17th century, for absolutely centuries, and they're fortified because it helped protect the wines on the journey in ships from Portugal over to England. So that's the whole reason for that. Portugal is a long, thin country. Right at the very top of it, up in the north, you have the Douro Valley, and the Douro Valley is carved out by the Douro River that runs from the Atlantic coast all the way through Portugal and into Spain on the other side. The Douro Valley is an incredibly warm wine region. Out there on the Atlantic coast, around the towns of Porto, which gives the style of wine its name, and Vila Nova de Gaia, it's relatively cool and it's cooled by the sea. As you move inland, along that river, it gets warmer and warmer and warmer. So the wines produced very far inland are a bit more rich and robust, and those that are grown out by the Atlantic coast are a little bit more elegant. All of the grapes in this region are indigenous. You're talking about varieties like Touriga Franca, Touriga Nacional, Tinta Cao. There's all of these wonderfully named grape varieties that you won't find in very many other places, and they go into producing this unique style of wine. You make white wine in port, you make a little bit of rosé in port nowadays, but the vast majority are red, so we're going to focus on that. There are four, I would say, key styles of port that I think you need to get your head around. The first one is vintage port. These are wines that come from one single year. They tend to be at a very high price point, and they are pressed, they are then fermented, and they are fortified and bottled pretty much immediately. So when you buy them on the shelf, they're very, very young. They've got huge amounts of tannin, they're really, really robust, very, very difficult things to drink immediately. So what you want to do with these vintage wines is they're bought to lay down. You leave them for a decade or more, and they're going to get better and better and better, and you need to age them before you drink them. Now, in 2019, that's not a way that most people drink their wines. None of us are really in the habit of laying down wines for a long time. So the port industry came up with an alternative. It's called LBV, Late Bottled Vintage. These are vintage wines again, wines from just 1 year, but they're aged in oak barrels at the Quinta, at where they're produced in the Douro Valley for a number of years before they're released. That softens them, and when they actually go into the bottle and end up on our shelves, they're ready to drink. So vintage ports, very stern, strong, robust wines. LBVs, more approachable. They're still big, broad, quite sweet, very tannic wines with a high alcohol content, both about 20%, but they're more approachable immediately when you buy them. There is a third style, the cheapest of the lot. It's called Ruby. And these are really young ports, really fiery, really alcoholic, bright, jammy fruited kind of wines, immediately put into bottles and sold. They're not as heavy and tannic, and they haven't got the ability to age as much as a vintage port, and they're often blends of a number of different years. But they're a really easy, accessible price point way of getting into this style, I suppose. Great with hard cheeses, things like that. The final style that I think you need to know about, and it's quite in vogue, it's quite trendy at the moment, is tawny port. So tawny ports are a more soft, nutty, lighter coloured style of port. They are pressed and fermented in exactly the same way out in the Douro Valley. What they do with all of these ports is they use these big old, what are essentially swimming pools. They put the grapes into them, and they go in and they jump around with their shorts on, stomping about with the grapes in big open air vats, and the wines then begin to ferment there. So all of those amazing sort of images that you might conjure up of wine production, of people jumping around in the tank stomping on things, that comes from port, and they largely still do it that way today. It's very traditional. These wines, though, get moved down to Vila Nova de Gaia, which is where all the shippers have their lodges, and then in huge oaked barrels, very old oak barrels, so they don't give much flavour or textures to the wines, these wines age for long, long periods of time, the tawny ports. They're sold in age brackets, so you can buy them at 10 years, 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old. The older they get, the lighter colour, because the colour in the wine literally falls out of it the older they get, and the really strong, robust, ripe fruit flavours that were there originally, they begin to sink and reduce themselves as well. They're replaced by this nutty, slightly saline, salty, elegant character. So if you like the idea of that, the older they are, the more of that character they have. The lovely thing about tawnies is because they have got a slightly lighter character to them than any of the other ports, is you can chill them down, and a lot of the shippers, if you go out to Porto or Vila Nova de Gaia, are sitting out in the sunshine drinking cold glasses of tawny ports. Highly recommended. If you're gonna have port, do it at Christmas by all means, but have it throughout the year as well. Anytime you've got blue cheese, it's one of the greatest pairings on the planet. Really salty blue cheese with high alcohol, rich, ripe, really sort of boozy, bright vintage ports. Like, there is no better pairing on earth. But get it in your glass. Oh, final thing. White port, well, I wasn't going to talk about it. Got to try white port and tonic. Cheap, cheap, cheap bottles of white port for about a tenner. You can buy them in pretty much every supermarket. Mix it with tonic like a G&T. It's absolute heaven. Great summer drinking. Cheers.